Export of condensate reflect evolution, not revolution, in crude export regulation. On June 24, 2014, various news sources reported that the Department of Commerce (DOC) had allowed two companies to export processed condensate, suggesting a breakthrough in the 40-year ban on crude oil export. The reality might not match the dramatic headline, however. It appears that the administration hasn't changed course or broken major ground in reforming the 1970s era crude export ban. Instead, it appears these developments are part of an ongoing process at the Commerce Department, largely shielded from view on a case-by-case basis to define and clarify what particular type oils are deemed crude oil for the purposes of the ban. In response to the fuel and geopolitical crisis of the 1970s, Congress passed the Energy Policy and Conservation Act curbing export of crude oil and natural gas. Limits on export to Canada were relaxed during the Reagan administration, but export to other destinations have remained virtually nil. Proponents of maintaining the current policy point to the need to maintain low domestic gas prices, national security factors, the goal of U.S. energy independence, and the unpredictable effect of altering the long-standing ban. However, the boom in North Dakota and Texas shale oil production has altered the landscape for crude oil, and lifting the ban has been much discussed in Washington. Earlier this year, the Senate held its first hearing indicate to consider loosening the restriction, and in recent weeks, top White House and Energy Department officials have acknowledged that crude export reform is under consideration. Much of the new oil being produced in North Dakota and Texas lacks sweet, low sulfur oil, and the difficulties in shipping and refining this production with Midwest and Gulf refining infrastructure built to capitalize on heavy, sour feedstock imported from abroad. Allowing free trade could create trading opportunities to more efficiently balance crude supplies to our existing infrastructure. Treatment on condensate under the crude export ban. There are a number of legal quirks in the application of the crude oil export regulation, but one of the most challenging is the application of the export laws to condensate, a mix of hydrocarbon lighter than crude oil that can be collected in liquid form at oil and gas wellhead. There is no formal regulatory specification for condensate, and the term can be used to refer to different products. Least condensate generally refers to liquid collected at the well site. It differs from plant condensate that is produced from the wellhead as gas, but it is converted to liquid once separated at a natural gas processing plant. The practical issues presented by condensate are immediate. Domestic condensate production has roughly doubled in the past 3 years to 1.2 mp per d and is forecasted to reach 1.6 mp per d by the end of 2018, according to some estimates, threatening to soon overwhelm Gulf Coast refining and processing capabilities. Crude oil is defined in Commerce Department Export Administration Regulation 15 CFR Part 754 as a mixture of hydrocarbon that existed in liquid phase in underground reservoir and remain liquid at atmospheric pressure after passing through surface separating facilities, and which hasn't been processed through a crude oil distillation tower. The rule include reconstitute crude petroleum and least condensate, liquid hydrocarbon produced from tar sand, gilsonite, and oil shale. Drip gases are also included. Topped crude oil, residual oil, and other finished and unfinished oil are excluded. Although the rule text has been in place for nearly 2 decades, little attention was paid in the past to fleshing out to regulation in purchase wording. Now, however, with the boom in domestic production, it is suddenly critical for the Industry and Commerce Department to work through the details of which hydrocarbons are considered least condensate in the modern era of shale production and what type of processing might trigger the exception for crude processed through a crude oil distillation tower and for dropped crude oil, residual oil, and other finished and unfinished oil. These issues are being worked out largely behind closed doors on a case-by-case basis, either through dialogue and relevant officials or through commodity classification requests, which are requests for private ruling on the controls applicable to specific commodities. The ruling cited by the media this week likely represent part of this process. Unfortunately, most of this policymaking is shielded from the industry and public view. Unlike custom ruling, export licenses and classification ruling generally are statutorily protected from disclosure. So, decision making can go on without notice or comment by industry players, even those potentially most impacted. Conclusion and recommendation. While these issues of defining condensate might seem technical and legal, they have major real world consequences for investment, infrastructure, and trade. According to a recent FT report, new simple distillation and processing unit, splitters, and topping unit representing over 400,000 BND of production are coming online in and around Port Arthur, focused on making condensate exportable. The Commerce Department ruling have already had an impact on the industry, but since the agency is operating on a case-by-case basis, companies that will profit the most are the ones who engage early with regulators. Companies looking for more certainty about the export restriction on particular type of condensate or other product have little to gain from remaining on the sideline. Engaging with policymakers and seeking formal ruling where needed can minimize the regulatory risk of investing in new and untested commodities and infrastructure. More broadly, it is clear that the industry, media, and public interest in the administration policymaking in this era is growing quickly. Accordingly, the Commerce Department may be considering using more traditional policymaking tools, such as notice and comment rulemaking, to evolve U.S. energy policy in a more even-handed and transparent way. Such a move could be beneficial to the extent it would allow the administration to seek comment from impacted parties.